In 1907, Sara Louisa Ryan from County Tipperary became a Bahá'í in London. Sara was the child of a staunch Roman Catholic father and an Anglo-Protestant mother, and unfortunately, she witnessed firsthand the effects of religious intolerance. Many years later, Sara's daughter, Mary Basil Hall, described the effect this formative experience had had on her mother. The tragedy of religious intolerance had burnt deeply into her soul and had inspired her quest for the path of truth, which she found at last when she came into touch with the Bahá'í revelation. When Sara, who became Lady Blomfield through marriage, accepted the Bahá'í teachings in 1907, it was a turning point in a lifelong quest for truth. In contrast to many women of her generation and position who are primarily concerned with the social events of polite society, Lady Blomfield spent her time in religious and humanitarian activities. A supporter of the suffragettes and of Home Rule for Ireland, she was a fearless protector of the rights of women, children, prisoners and animals. Always a defender of the oppressed, she was also an ardent promoter of peace and interreligious understanding. While she was vehemently opposed to violence, she was an outstanding humanitarian who was always willing to lend her energy to the relief of suffering. At the height of World War I, in 1916, Lady Blomfield and her daughters went to help the French Red Cross at a hospital in Paris. "Any kind of suffering touched my mother profoundly," recalled her daughter Mary. But the sight of young men maimed for life and the new and horrible experiences she had to endure during the dressing of wounds, her mental agony reflecting their pain, tortured her beyond words. After that first heartrending morning in the wards, we were silent as we walked back to the Hotel de Jena for luncheon. We imagined ourselves unable to touch any food, but my mother's courage and strength of mind prevailed. She said quietly, "We must eat, or we shall be ill ourselves. Then we shall not be able to help." Lady Blomfield and her daughters continued to volunteer in hospitals for the duration of the war. After the war, inspired by the teachings of Baha'u'llah to care for and educate children, Lady Blomfield turned her attention to the plight of the millions of children orphaned or made refugees as a result of the conflict. In 1919, she supported her friends Eglantine Jebb and Dorothy Buxton to establish the Save the Children Fund. Supported in her efforts by Abdul Baha, Lady Blomfield was actively involved with the Save the Children Fund throughout her life. In its first 2 years, the fund raised £1 million to care for orphans, provide food and facilities to children's hospitals, and establish welfare centres and clinics. Soon, groups in other countries arose to support the cause of the world's children. The Pope made a generous contribution, which allowed the International Union of the Save the Children Fund to be established in Geneva, thus creating a coordinating and networking centre for the different national groups. The International Committee of the Red Cross gave its patronage to the fund and placed its delegates in war-stricken countries at the service of the Union. From then on, it grew into an organisation which still does extensive work in the relief and protection of children. Sara Louisa Ryan died in 1939. 20 years later, the influence of her work was still being felt when the Declaration of the Rights of the Child was adopted by the United Nations. This declaration had its roots in the Geneva Declaration, a document drawn up by the Save the Children Fund International and adopted by the League of Nations in 1924. "Nothing less than the happiness of every human being is the ideal for the Baha'i," wrote Lady Blomfield. "He must not loiter by the way on the road to this ideal. He must strive and work and strive until all the regions of the earth shall become resplendent.